The Brain's Genocide. It's been nearly 6 years since my internship at Warner Brothers. How time flies, right? Well, most of my memories are positive. I had a great time, learned a lot, made some awesome friends, and gained invaluable experience that still helps me today. There were a couple of unpleasant incidents, however, but I figure every job's like that, right? Like, here's one. I figure I won't be burning any bridges because I'm not naming names or getting too specific. And I doubt anyone would come forward to claim culpability anyway, so I think I'm safe. And hopefully none of you will go behind my back to rat me out to any sabotaging industry higher-ups. Believe me, they've got bigger fish to fry. Besides, plausible deniability, it's all fictional. Oh, also, this story is not for the young'uns, and I don't just mean because it may jade you out of working for the dream factory that is Tinseltown. Anyways, sometimes I would get sent to the Warner's archive on the other side of the studio lot, usually to pick up some documents or a script too sensitive to fax. Once in a while, they'd send me to retrieve a tape or DVD an executive wanted to watch, for entertainment or research purposes. On one such trip, I won't say what property they were thinking of remaking, not gonna violate my NDA. Anyway, I got to see the old cartoon archives, which was neat. I took perhaps more time than I should have, going through the files and confessional time. Is the statute of limitations up? Well, I took one DVD that interested me, took it back to the office, and brought myself a copy before returning it at the end of the day. So it's not really stealing, right? The DVD was labeled in purple Sharpie. These weren't in the glossy professional boxes. These were random and unreleased. Animaniacs extras. So you can imagine how that appealed to me. I loved the Animaniacs, and I got a real kick of the time the senior intern gave me a studio tour, and when we came to the water tower, he said, "And that's where the Animaniacs live." I took the DVD I copied home and opened it up on my computer. There were several files on the disc. Most were, as I expected, simply deleted scenes, very short clips deleted. I assumed either for content, think fingerprints, or just time. But a file called The Brain's Genocide.avi suddenly caught my eye. I knew they flew some stuff under the radar and could get subversive, again, fingerprints, but jokes about mass murder? Well, I took a watch. This wasn't a 30-second clip, but an entire, I guess you'd call it, lost episode of Pinky and the Brain. I was both jazzed and puzzled. Why would they throw away an entire episode? Then I saw. The Brain's Genocide starts off like any typical episode of Pinky and the Brain, except the sound quality in the opening song was a bit off. You know, one is a genius, the other is insane. But the last bit was weirdly scratchy and uncharacteristic. Like, they got freaking Danzig to sing the last word. Anyway, the plot begins as standard fare. The Brain's scheme this time is to brainwash the world by getting onto the radio waves and sending out a hypnotic message. Maybe they cut it for being too derivative of other episodes? Though I did like the obvious reference to War of the Worlds, cause Maurice LaMarche's Orson Welles is always classic. I soon began to notice unsettling irregularities. Like, when Pinky and the Brain break into the radio station, they are temporarily held up by a security guard named Phil. It was on his name tag. The Brain takes out his brainwashing microphone, I don't know, it was the device he was using for his grand plot, and tells Phil to stand down. We see the sound waves come out of the mic and stop Phil in his tracks. There's an extended, still close-up on Phil's face, and it is unnervingly realistic. Way too much detail of his crusty, wide-open eyes, crow's feet, and pasty skin. Honestly, it felt far more like something from Ren and Stimpy, not Pinky and the Brain. And for a split second, it looked like a rotoscoped image of a real man's face. And this goes on for 10 silent, still seconds. Very uncanny. So, typical of the formula, Brain's plan starts to work before Pinky finds a way to screw it up. We see the transmission go around the world and everyone start to submit to the Brain as their unquestioned leader before Pinky stumbles into the mic and starts doing his narf narf thing. Then that's the message everyone is brainwashed with. Every human on Earth starts jumping up and down and saying narf. It's not as funny as you might think because they make it too realistic, like showing what would happen if everyone stopped what they were doing and immediately acted like Pinky. I mean, car crashes with twisted limbs in a kid's cartoon. A surprisingly well-drawn caricature of President Clinton bangs his head on the Resolute desk until blood comes out. The Brain is furious, naturally. His face takes on a very aggressive, ugly, just angry quality, like he's madder and more vicious than his usual annoyance with his partner. We then cut to the Brain's lab, where Pinky is cuffed down to a table with a grotesque array of metal instruments hanging over him. The Brain is standing next to him with his hand on a lever. It's not goofy at all because Pinky is legitimately frightened. It's so out of character for him. I mean, his voice is literally shaking when he says, "What are you going to do to me tonight, Brain?" "What I should have done to you every night." The Brain said this with real venom, and Pinky starts to sob. "Please don't. I promise I'll be a good boy." But the Brain ignores his pleas, and we only focus on the Brain's face, a twisted, hateful visage, as he pulls the lever and watches his friend get tortured to death. And here is where the video went from simply a dark cartoon to legitimately real-life disturbing. Because Pinky's screams now sound like a real mouse being tortured. Not Rob Paulson's cartoon yipping, but an actual animal shrieking for its life. Really, really bad. Then we see the Brain rise to power. Now that he's unencumbered by his buffoonish assistant, back to the radio station and his brainwashing signal going all over the world. We see statues raised in the Brain's honor, men in jackboots and mice masks marching through the streets and oppressing dissidents. I guess their masks were supposed to look like the Brain, but I couldn't help but think of Art Spiegelman's mouse. Here's something else messed up. The cartoon of this megalomaniac cartoon mouse's world domination is intercut with brief footage. Poor quality, like a cheap camcorder, panning across a field showing a mass grave of children. Live action. Silent. No living character on screen. Just a pile of dead little bodies. I couldn't recognize the setting or even the country. It looked flat and muddy, or even when it took place. What 20th century atrocity was this portraying? Goosebumps. Not to say that the Brain was triumphing in this power. Back to animation, we see him sitting in his palace. I guess it was supposed to be the Buckingham, as the establishing shot was the huge flags, literally just the Brain's face on a black background, outside indicated. The Brain is sitting in his empty office, alone, in the same odd state of despair. Pinky. His soft voice pierces the silence, and I jumped a little because it had been so quiet for so long. The Brain looks across the room and sees Pinky standing there. Years later, when I saw Phantom Thread, I swore Paul Thomas Anderson must have seen this lost episode, because the scene where Reynolds sees his mother's ghost just standing there, silently watching him. Pinky's face is blank and drawn out, and the Brain's voice is forlorn and resigned to this bleak state. He said, "You're watching me. That's all right. I deserve it." Are you pondering what I'm pondering? The Brain lowers his head and starts to sob. What have I done? And we hear his voice over-narrate the last two sentences. I still get chills writing this years later. The camera, black and white, now shows live-action footage of the Warner Bros. Lot. I don't see who's filming, but I see the silhouette of the cameraman, and it looked like he was wearing a giant mouse head. A theme park costume, but no one was having fun. The camera stops on a lingering shot of the water tower, WB displayed prominently. What have I done? Cut to inside the water tower, I'm guessing. It looks like security footage. A large, empty basin where Phil, the security guard in real life, looks just like his cartoon counterpart, is trapped and screaming for help. Of course, this is all silent except for Brain's "What have I done?" over and over, but you can tell he's in pain, especially when he scratches at the metal as if trying to claw his way out. The final shot is just that, a still photo of Phil, drowned inside the water tower, now filled to the brim. Cut to static. I threw away that disc, didn't tell anybody about it at work, and from then on, I have avoided walking by the Animaniacs tower, even when it meant taking the long route around the studio. I can see why they axed the episode now. I think I'm done snooping.